Warning. Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Long-haul truckers. What's the creepiest, most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? A good friend of mine told me this story years ago. He is the stereotypical old big bad trucker. I've seen some weird stuff with him while driving in South Texas along the border. He never batted an eye, but while telling me this story he had goosebumps and a concerned expression. Which from this guy is about the equivalent of a trembling lip and shit-stained pants. I'll tell the story in the first person as he told it to me. Years ago in the late 90s I was on my way from the house, Central Texas, heading to Laredo to pick up a load. It was early morning, around 4 or 5. I had just come off a string of days at home, so I know I wasn't tired. I am on one of those 2-lane winding roads in the absolute middle of bumfuck nowhere, when I see something on the side of the road at the edge of my high beams. At first I just thought it was roadkill, as is usually the case. As I get closer, I see that it is roadkill, and there's someone crouching over the deer carcass. I remember thinking either this guy's taking the antlers as a trophy, or he's fucking sick. As I got closer still I can now see that's this guy's eating the fucking deer. He's pulling chunks of meat from the stomach and bringing them up to his face. At this point he stops mid-motion and looks up at me. Not at my truck, but at me. It stands up, and that's when I see that it's fucking huge, brown, and covered in hair. I remember thinking at this point, oh fuck. This thing is standing on the tiny shoulder looking at me. By this point, maybe 3 seconds have passed and I'm about at the point in the road he's standing at. I didn't even think of stopping, in fact I'm starting to lay on it and get the hell out of there. As I'm passing it, it's looking at me, again not at the truck, it's looking through the driver's side windshield at me. He obviously has the intelligence to know that there's a driver in here and knows where I'm sitting. As I start to pass him I can still see its head above the hood of an old needle-nose Pete. Old truck design where the hood goes straight out from the windshield, known for being tall and difficult to see around. This thing is fucking giant. I remember seeing what looked like human intelligence in its eyes. It scares the shit out of me. My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho and driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grade and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer it jumped down, and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound it leaped down and then leaped over to the other side of the embankment. At the time he thought it was a Sasquatch, now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain. Myself and 2 friends had to drive from Laredo, Texas to Baton Rouge, one night in my Ford van. It was about 2 a.m. There is a particularly long and dark section of highway just outside Laredo, no buildings, towns or lights for about 50 miles. I was in the right lane coming up on a truck and pulled out into the left passing lane. As I was slowly overtaking this long truck, my peripheral vision caught a sudden movement of this big truck towards the right shoulder. I saw the truck was swerving to avoid hitting a person dressed in all white face, whose arms were folded across the chest and eyes were closed as they walked across the highway. I swerved to the left and barely missed this ghostly-looking person with my passenger mirror, can still remember seeing that the eyes were closed. That's how close we came to hitting this person. My dad has told me this story a couple times and each time it always kind of weirds me out. He is not a trucker, but when he was in the military one night him and a buddy went out to get food. About halfway into their drive down a dark road my dad and his buddy noticed a woman in a red dress with black hair walking. My dad and his buddy found it odd because it didn't seem safe, and it wasn't that warm. My dad said deep down he knew stopping was a bad idea, and so they drove by a little more slowly to get a glimpse to see if she needed help. As they drove by my dad and his friend both swear she has no face. Instead there was just a black hole as if she had been in a wreck, and her face was taken off. It freaked them both out so badly my dad floored it, and when they stopped to eat both of them agreed they saw the same thing. Come to find out a woman had been killed earlier that year in an accident. They were talking about it when a stranger told them the sightings of the woman were actually common. I am not one to believe in the paranormal, but the story is still kind of weird. Whoa, that actually reminds me of a story. I live in Spokane, which is about 45 minutes away from Coeur d'Alene. I was driving back from my aunt's in the dark one night, and just hit a massive wall of fog. I turned the corner and a whole herd of deer come running down the road toward me. I slowed down a lot, so I don't hit them. Then after another few seconds I see a woman standing in the street facing away from me with dirty clothes. The area I was in is known to have meth heads and heroin addicts, so I cracked the window and called out to her, and asked if she needed me to call anyone. As soon as I spoke, her head whipped around, and it looked like she was a burn victim. Huge lidless eyes, no eyebrows, Voldemort nose, and a mouth that looked like it was melted or sewn up or something. Then she ran off into the woods and I drove a lot faster than I should have home. Maybe a bit off the mark, but it still scared the crap out of me. I was headed west on I-76 here in Denver, just cruising along at about 70 miles per hour. Out of nowhere, I saw a massive, almost solid cloud of what looked to be dirt coming at me. I'd say it was at least 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. I scanned ahead of me but couldn't see any vehicle it could have came from. With nowhere to go, I slowed down and took the hit, hoping there wasn't anything big enough in there to come through the windshield or jack up my truck owner-operator. It was pretty loud as I smashed through it. The instant it hit, I knew it wasn't dirt though. I immediately hit the washers because I couldn't see a damn thing through all of the carnage. My windshield was painted with guts. Turns out it was bees, freaking huge bees that sounded like rocks when they hit. I can't even imagine seeing that swarm if I was walking. They would kill the crap out of anything in their path. Creepiest: driving I-40 I-30 through Texas and Arkansas. I would see what looked like animals' faces popping out of the bushes, but longer than a glance proved nothing there. They had just paved the highway, and there was hardly any traffic. I was dead tired. It was super dark. Highway hypnosis, I suppose. Paranormal: when I went to local driving, my route ran near an Air Reserve base in Indiana, so you'd see planes and helicopters pretty often. One night, about 2 a.m., I was headed to pick up another load when I saw a bright green light in the corner of my windshield. It was too low to be an aircraft. It moved pretty slowly, then darted, and I lost sight of it behind some trees I drove by. Typical I saw UFO shit, but I still think it was just a helicopter or jet that I saw at the prefect angle that turned after takeoff. The jet pilots have broken the sound barrier over town a couple times in the past, sonic boom, so a jet flying abnormally isn't necessarily out of the realm of possibility. Just batshit crazy driving south on I-75 in the winter in Ohio. I witnessed a compact car like a Cobalt or similar get on the on-ramp to merge into I-75 north and lost control. They went sideways, fell at least 6 feet off the ramp, and onto the shoulder of the interstate, landing on all four wheels, spun 360 degrees, and then proceeded to merge into traffic like it was fucking nothing. Blew my fucking mind. The CB radio was going fucking nuts for about 5 minutes. Holy shit, who else just fucking saw that? Etc. When I was a kid, my cousin and I walked through the woods, down into a field, and came upon this pretty secluded farmhouse. There was a small, overgrown paddock filled with honeysuckles. We'd go there to just hang out, talk, and suck on some honeysuckle. There was a long drive to the house, and, one day, a truck was making a delivery, but the driver must have been having trouble with the stick shift, because he was stalling out. We watched him from the bushes and basically giggled at his expense. A few weeks later, there's a story in the paper about this old farmhouse that just sold, and that it might be haunted. They sometimes would hear little girls' voices. One of the stories included a delivery driver who heard them giggling, and it really spooked him. My aunt saw it and was like, "Is this that place you guys are always hanging around?" So I accidentally haunted some poor homeowners. Boo. I was driving near Las Vegas at around 3 a.m. I had been following a few black SUVs along the highway for a good hour or so. They had Nevada plates that were single-digit numbers in order, 1, 2, 3. Suddenly they all pulled off the highway down a dirt path. There was no mile marker or cactus that would indicate a path there. It was just dirt. After pulling off the road, they all turned their lights off. I didn't stick around. It was creepy. I'm a truck driver in the UK. Was driving through rural Scotland one night going down a country lane. All of a sudden I start to see flashing lights come through the trees. Lights of all colors flashing through the trees and causing some really freaky looking shadows on the road. I'm not a believer of aliens or anything, but my first thought was UFOs. Safe to say I put my foot down and got out of there. Found out the next day it was rave happening in a field. But at the time it didn't half scare me. My dad told me and my brothers this story when we were growing up, and it's always stuck with me, particularly on long drives when I'm feeling a bit sleepy. The first time I remember hearing it was after I asked him if angels were real. I was probably 7 or 8 yo. He drove trucks decades ago, before I was born, and before labor laws around limits and brakes were more standard. I'm assuming it's different now. He fairly regularly accepted calls that would extend his shift to where he was driving 24, 36 hours, or more without a break longer than a quick bathroom or fast food stop. My dad has a pretty mathematical brain. He's the type to make up logic puzzles out of something totally mundane just for fun. Whenever we were driving around town, he'd regularly ask me things like how long would it take us to get from home to the store if we were going 30 miles per hour, but had to stop for 5 minutes in the middle because a family of kittens were crossing the road, etc. He'd come up with similar equations for himself while he was driving solo that involved things he was seeing like the odometer, mileage markers, the time, and then he could test his speed based on the equation, etc. One night after having already driven a particularly long day, he noticed his eyes getting droopier, and the whole roll down the window and blast the music up thing didn't seem to be helping much. It was a rainy night on a pretty windy mountain road without a shoulder to pull over safely, so he started doing those logic games out loud to keep alert and awake. He was saying something to the effect of, "I just passed mile marker 146, so what time will it be when I reach 200, if I'm going 55 miles per hour? Then he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt his head do the nod jerk thing which will come up with a gasp. He opened his eyes to see he was driving straight towards mile marker 158, which would have sent his whole truck tumbling down a random-ass mountain ravine. He was able to correct the course safely back, but it was a matter of seconds between that reality and certain death. He insists to this day that he slept through 12 miles of windy mountain road going 60+ miles per hour, only to wake up right at the last moment between life and death. The story usually ends with him tearing up saying, "I don't know if there's angels, but I know there's something bigger going on in this universe than our human brains have been able to understand yet. If I wouldn't have woken up right when I did, you kids wouldn't be here today," and that's something that feels pretty close to spiritual. This is my father's story, and he wasn't a long-haul trucker, but rather 18-year-old gas station attendant in the late 70s, and without a certain long-haul trucker I probably wouldn't be here. The gas station was 24 hours, and my dad was the only one working the night shift, 11/7 I think. A guy comes in and just gives him the creeps. Seems sketchy. He was wearing tight jacket pants, and you could tell he had something in his pants under the jacket. It was during the summer and was warm, so why is he wearing a jacket to begin with? It was later confirmed he was on drugs. A lot of truck drivers used this station as it was the only one open 24 hours for a long stretch of the highway. They also had a big lot where they let truckers park and sleep or take a break. On this night at this time it was just my dad, sketchy dude, and one trucker in there he kinda knew, as in, came infrequent enough to be conversational, and asked if he'd stay in the station and hang out until sketchy dude left. Well, after looking at the stock shelves for several minutes while sneaking peeks at my dad behind the counter, the sketchy guy eventually looked fed up and got into his blue car and sped off. Cool trucker guy hung out with my dad a little longer, until another couple of guys came in to use the booths they had to eat a sandwich. I should also point out this was pretty middle of nowhere rural southeast United States in the 1970s. CB and landline was it. My dad only had a landline in the store. Dad did not have any protection or weapon of any kind. So the hours pass and my dad had shaken off the paranoia when all of a sudden this truck driver guy in a car comes hauling ass into the lot, jumps out, and sprints into the store, hollering he needs a phone. He didn't have a CB nor did he see a phone at the other station. He also wasn't familiar with the area, and my dad's station was the first place he found. Calls 911 to report that he had walked in on a gas station 40 miles back, next closest station, to find the attendant shot and dead. No one else around. And the only other piece of information is that a blue car was speeding out of the lot when the trucker pulled in. Apparently they eventually apprehend the guy in the blue car. My dad confirms it was sketchy dude from earlier in the night, and they charge him with murder and armed robbery. To the long-haul trucker who waited around with my dad that night, thanks and hope you're keeping it real. Also worth adding that apparently sketchy guy in blue car was already a bad apple who was either being looked for or on probation or something. He was in the system. Not a trucker, but I've driven cross-country a few times. Have two freaky things that have happened. First, middle of the night with a buddy, and we pulled off to the side of the highway to take a piss and switch drivers. Nobody else around on the road. I walk to the side, pitch black, whip it out and start to pee. My buddy is just stretching his back or whatever. I heard something in the woods shake a tree. No other way to describe it, a tree about 30 feet away shook. Then I hear something big crashing through the woods coming straight for us in the car. My buddy and I don't even say anything. He dives in the driver's side, and I jump through the passenger window, pants still down. He floors it out of there, legs and pants dangling outside. Never did see anything in the rear view mirror, but there was something out there coming at us. My buddy likes to say he heard me stop peeing when that tree shook. Second, I was solo somewhere in West Virginia, again middle of the night. I got off an exit, one of those long curvy ones. I saw lights before I got off and assumed it was exit stuff, or maybe even construction. Get to the exit and it's not construction, it's a ton of Army or National Guard guys. The exit was lit up brighter than daytime, so many lights set up pointing everywhere. The Army guys were completely decked out, gas masks on and assault rifles. They were sprinting around. One guy at the corner was frantically waving me through to get back on the highway. I gunned it out of there. Looked in the news later and didn't see anything, no idea what was going on that night. Alright. My first month and I was in a different dorm. Top bunk, in the middle of the room. I was taking a nap, with my arm hanging off the side. I don't remember what I was dreaming about, but this I remember clear as day. Just a cat hissing and then screaming, and someone bit my finger, hard. Hard enough to bruise under my nail. I was totally alone in the dorm, and I was sleeping on my stomach, arm dangling, so it wasn't me doing it in my sleep. The dorms were separated by one half wall, and I got up, checked it out thinking someone ran over there and was just screwing with me, and then there was a bang on the wall from by my bunk. Again, totally alone. I can't speak for this, because it was in the girls' dorm, but they had a little girl that would run through the bathroom screaming and leaving behind wet footprints. Their dorm was by our little pond, and when we were out there some girls came out screaming in towels saying it happened. A female staff went and checked it out, and I remember when she came out she had that expression that's kind of like a half smile that said, "I don't know, and I can't explain it," and she was like, "Yeah, there's a child's footprints in there." Okay, so here's a spook for you, and to this day I still have no idea WTF. So I was in the VIMD area, and had a lot of work-related sites ranging from downtown Baltimore to Virginia Beach and all around. Friday wrapped up, and I hit the road to some social arrangements I had made for the weekend. Spent the weekend with friends out in various parts of VI, got dragged off to other places even further out, the usual weekend fun times. It's late Sunday night when I have to leave, or I'm not going to be able to get home in time to start my, thankfully late afternoon, Monday. I'm fully rested, I didn't do any drinking, I'm not into drugs. On the highway at about 3 a.m., in the middle of bumfuck nowhere between Roanoke and DC, absolutely nobody around. I'm cruising along in the left lane simply because nobody else is around. No headlights for the past hour, no taillights either. No road lamps either. It's dark, it's mildly damp, it's foggy. I have the music up, I'm feeling good, all is fine. And then I just happen to look to the left, and there is a fucking dog barking at me. A German Shepherd, in a car passenger seat, somewhat blue glow from the instruments inside the car, and it's got its face to its window, and it's barking its head off at me. I get a good hard look at it, too, because at first my brain is not registering cop car, dummy. I'm doing 90 plus in a 75, I promptly have the oh shit moment when the dog, the instruments, the white Crown Vic light bar all click in my brain after a second hard look. I put my foot on the brakes and start slowing down hard but safe, to pull over. I even put my blinker on to start shifting lanes over to the right to pull over because wait. There is no shoulder on the left side of this road. I look back to my left, where there is still no shoulder room for another car. And it's just gone. No trace. I slammed my brakes and stopped in the middle of the fucking highway, flipped on all my light bars, and even looked around with my handheld spot. There was nothing. No tail lights, no headlights, no engine sounds, nothing. There are no other tire marks in the damp but mine, and I can see for a nice long distance both ways, too. Nothing. My vehicle had great visibility, and a lot of extra lighting, off-road SUV with the trimmings. There is no possible way somebody pulled a sneaky, let alone drove that fast on wet sloped grass and rocks on my left side. So, yep, there you have it. Ghost cop and his dog didn't like me speeding, apparently. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Spookasm for daily videos.